most familiar clinical symptom of rabies is associated with difficulty in swallowing. When fluid comes in contact with the throat, it is violently expelled, at the same time producing painful, spasmodic muscular contractions.
What starts as a tiny bite ends with the brain completely losing control of the body. Now, what is this virus? Rabies is one of the oldest and most feared viruses known to humanity. It is a viral infection that attacks the nervous system, and once symptoms appear, it is almost always fatal. The virus is usually transmitted through the bite of an infected animal, most commonly dogs, in many parts of the world, but also bats, raccoons, and other mammals. What makes rabies terrifying is not just what it does, it is how silently it begins. Stage 1. The bite. Silent entry. Everything starts with a bite or a deep scratch from an infected animal. At the moment the skin breaks, the virus carried in saliva is immediately introduced into the underlying tissue. Even though this sounds dramatic, nothing major happens instantly from the body's perspective. The wound may bleed and begin to close, and the immune system responds to the injury itself, but not yet to the virus in a meaningful way. Instead of spreading widely, the virus stays localized in the muscle tissue surrounding the bite site. This is important because muscle tissue acts like a temporary safe zone for the virus. It avoids detection while it slowly adjusts to its new environment inside the human body. During this stage, the person feels completely normal apart from the physical wound. There are no neurological symptoms, no fever specific to the virus, and no warning signs that something more serious is developing. What makes this stage dangerous is the false sense of safety. While everything looks like a simple animal bite, the virus is already inside the body, beginning its first steps toward the nervous system. Stage 2. Hidden replication. After establishing itself in the muscle tissue, the virus begins to replicate more actively. It uses the muscle cells as a protected environment where it can produce more viral particles without immediately triggering a strong immune response. This phase can last for a variable amount of time, depending on factors like the location of the bite, the amount of virus introduced, and how far the wound is from the central nervous system. Bites closer to the head or neck generally progress faster, while bites on the legs or feet may take much longer to show symptoms. During this entire period, the infected person feels completely normal. There is no fever-specific illness or clear sign that a viral infection is progressing inside the body. This is one of the most deceptive aspects of rabies. The virus is not rushing through the bloodstream like many other infections. Instead, it is building strength quietly in one localized area while avoiding detection. Meanwhile, the immune system is focused mainly on healing the wound itself and does not yet mount a strong, targeted response against the virus. By the end of this stage, the virus population is large enough and prepared for the next critical step. Stage 3. Nervous system intrusion. At this stage, the virus reaches a nerve ending located near the infected muscle tissue. This is the most important turning point in the entire infection process. Once rabies enters a nerve cell, it is no longer exposed to the immune system in the same way as before. Nerves are protected pathways in the body designed to carry signals rather than allow easy access to pathogens. The virus takes advantage of this and attaches itself to the nerve membrane before entering the nerve cell. Once inside, it is effectively hidden from immune attack. At this point, the infection stops behaving like a typical tissue infection and becomes a nervous system infection. The virus is now inside the body's internal communication network. It is no longer simply multiplying in one place. It has gained access to a system that connects directly to the spinal cord and brain. Even though no major symptoms appear yet, this stage marks a permanent shift in how dangerous the infection has become. Because once the virus enters the nervous system, there are very few natural barriers left to stop its progression. Stage 4. The ascent through the nerves. After entering the nervous system, the virus begins a slow and highly controlled journey toward the brain. Instead of spreading through blood or lymph like most viruses, rabies moves by traveling inside nerve cells themselves. It uses a process called retrograde transport, which means it moves in the opposite direction of normal nerve signal flow. Rather than going outward from the brain, it moves inward toward it. This movement is extremely slow compared to other infectious processes, often measured in millimeters per day. The exact speed depends on the distance from the bite site to the brain, which is why incubation periods vary widely from weeks to months. During this entire journey, the infected person typically experiences no obvious symptoms. Life continues normally, and there is often no indication that a fatal neurological infection is progressing inside the body. However, internally, the virus is steadily moving from peripheral nerves toward the spinal cord. Once it reaches the spinal cord, it gains a faster route to the brain and begins spreading more efficiently within the central nervous system. Stage 5. Early brain infection. Once the virus reaches the brain, or closely connected central nervous system structures, the first noticeable symptoms begin to appear. These symptoms are often non-specific, which means they can resemble many other common illnesses at first. The infected person may develop fever, headache, fatigue, and general weakness. There may also be psychological changes, such as anxiety, restlessness, or a feeling that something is wrong without a clear reason. One of the earliest unique signs can be unusual sensations near the original bite site, even though the wound itself has already healed. This can include tingling, itching, or pain, which is caused by the virus now affecting nerve pathways connected to that region. At this stage, the virus begins replicating more aggressively within the brain and spinal cord. It spreads into areas responsible for regulating basic bodily functions, emotion, and behavior. Although symptoms may still seem mild compared to later stages, this is the point where the infection becomes extremely dangerous. Because the virus is now inside the central command system of the body and is no longer localized or contained. Stage 6. Neurological dysfunction. As the virus spreads deeper into the brain, it begins to disrupt normal neurological function on a large scale. The brain regions responsible for emotion, movement, swallowing, breathing, coordination, and sensory processing are all affected. This leads to a dramatic escalation in symptoms. The infected person may become extremely agitated, confused, and disoriented. Behavior can change rapidly and unpredictably with periods of aggression or panic. Hallucinations may occur as the brain's ability to process reality becomes impaired. One of the most distinctive symptoms is hydrophobia. This is not a fear of water itself, but a severe neurological reaction where attempting to swallow liquids triggers painful, involuntary throat spasms. Even the sight or sound of water can provoke distress due to conditioned brain responses. Sensitivity to light, sound, and touch may also become extreme as the nervous system becomes overstimulated. At this stage, the virus is actively interfering with the brain's control over basic survival mechanisms. Stage 7. System collapse. In the final stage, the infection has overwhelmed the central nervous system. The brain can no longer maintain control over essential body functions. Muscle coordination deteriorates, and paralysis begins to spread through different parts of the body. The respiratory system is eventually affected as the nerves controlling breathing fail to function properly. The infected person may slip into a coma as brain activity becomes severely impaired. At this point, the body is no longer able to sustain vital functions independently. Death follows as the nervous system completely shuts down and respiratory failure occurs. Once rabies reaches this stage, it is almost always irreversible.